You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
Wake up to the world you've been missing. Time to jump out of bed in the morning. No day, no life, now we're living. Can you feel it in the air that you're breathing? Time to show 'em what you're made of. Let's get back on track. Are you ready for a come on? Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Are you ready now? You're lifting off the ground. Welcome back. No coming down. Can you feel it all around? Welcome back.
Hello and welcome back to Super Mega Crash Beyond. I am your host, Stephen White. With me, as always, is my co-host, Lacey Finley.
A happy Monday.
Guess what, listeners? We have a guest this week.
We do.
And technically our first official guest. Now, I know that some people will be like, but you had somebody on 2 weeks ago that wasn't Lacey. Well, that was a different circumstance, and she was just tagging along. That wasn't a guest per se.
She was helping me out.
That's right.
Helping me out. Yeah.
So joining us this week for our first official guest is a name that listeners of our original show may actually remember. You know, anytime we had a pressing question that needed an answer and we would just be like, oh, we can't think of it, we would always just shout out, well, we got to ask Daeva. Daeva, what do you think? And then we normally have to wait a day or so before we get an answer because
he'd have to hear the podcast so he could hear the question. Yeah,
to
be fair to him.
We hadn't really perfected the psychic link where he could just answer us like that as we were recording. So,
Right.
But anyway, not today. Today, if we've got questions, he is here to answer our questions in real time. So please welcome the Daeva that we always talked about. Daeva!
Hi.
Hi!
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being had.
Well, we're glad that you were able to join us because we talked about, you know, whenever we got guests around, we thought you would be an interesting guest to have on first because people might not know you. They just know the name and be like, who is this Daeva person they're always shouting at? You know, to ask questions to. So we thought it would be kind of fun, not only just to talk to you in general, but maybe talk about something that you're passionate about, because we are going to talk about something you're passionate about, something you brought up, and maybe you can help us understand that passion a little bit more. But first and foremost, before we get into that, I guess I want to ask you to I guess we'll talk about where we all kind of got acquainted, because I think it was really Twitch where we all kind of got acquainted originally.
100%.
And it would have been on, well, I mean, I guess, were you one of Lace's mods when I came along?
Yes.
Probably, yeah.
Through a very strange kind of network of connections, I knew a person who knew Lacey. And she was like, hey, you should check this person out. And I think I've told Lacey this story before. If I hadn't, then we'll probably get a cackle out of her.
Because it was with OPN, right? When I was still doing Overpowered Noobs.
Yes.
Yeah. If anybody remembers that throwback.
So the very first time that I saw Lacey stream was from a recommendation from a friend. And when I was clicking the link, I was thinking, oh, my friend's going to be on here. And then I watched Lacey for like 20 minutes, and I was like, who the hell is this person? I don't know.
That's fair.
So I went and talked to her, and I was like, what is this? And she's like, just give her a chance. She's cool. She's cool. So I gave her a chance. She was cool. And then I started hanging out with her more and more. And she was like, hey, you're around all the time, and you seem like you're not completely psychotic. Can you moderate for me so that way I can not be surrounded by people who are absolute nut jobs? Because anybody who hasn't been on Twitch, there are some individuals that happen to roam around from live stream to live stream looking for people that they can just harass. And sometimes you need somebody to be like, no, go away.
Yeah. Chicks love that on the Twitchers too.
God.
We love it when they just come in and try to do all the harassing and stuff. But
honestly, anybody that isn't a straight white guy, you are just have a target on your face.
Just exactly, pretty much.
And even
then,
obnoxious.
you know,
yeah,
it's like I might have 2 more views than someone. Oh, it's because she's a woman, and I'm like, we're not even in the top 100. Shut up.
I have 7. They have 5.
Just
Fuck
need
off.
to make better content. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
seriously.
this is a you problem.
Yeah.
Not a me with boobs problem, or else I'd be way higher up than I am right now. Okay, if my boobs really got me that much. Just saying, I didn't
not wrong.
benefit.
Yeah. But I mean, within the context of where we all kind of got acquainted, I noticed we all kind of followed around in the same circles because whether or not it was Lacia's stream, you go to another stream, and then you would see similar faces. So we all kind of got online acquainted in that regard. And I always kind of
Similar
liked that.
personalities flocked together. And probably all of us finding like age appropriate people. Like we collected them all. We're like, oh, people our age. Come on.
Yeah. People you could connect with and you just felt like, yeah, I like this person. And then of course, as you mentioned, the worst of the worst would just kind of pop in every now and again. And I always felt awkward when those people would show up and you'd have certain streamers who, there would be certain streamers who would act as though like, they're fine. I'm like, they're a dick. What are you talking about? They're fine. And it would just, like, I felt like I was the bad guy because I was like, what am I missing? Am I just taking everything what they're saying to offense? Like, there was this one guy whose name I honestly cannot remember because that's how little he fucking mattered to me. I remembered what was when I did Man Cave, and I'd showed that video, and Lace, you aired it, the trailer on your stream.
I did, yeah.
And then he just started tearing into it and just mocking it, or I don't remember what the fuck he said, but it just got, I was like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? And other people were just like, that's just how he is. I was like, no, what? No.
I don't remember that. But yes, for some reason, I think a lot of them don't think the individuals are there. It's like they're talking to TV. Because even when I would play independent games and the devs, a lot of the times would come in to the stream. And so when someone would be making fun of graphics or this, that, or the other, I can remember devs being like, yeah, thank you. I'm like, yeah, that's the person who created it. That's right there that I've been talking to. I know you're behind a screen and everything, but I just don't think people really think it through that those individuals can be present in a live situation like this. And a lot of the times are.
There's a layer of anonymity there too, because when I'm sitting here at my computer behind a username, you can't just look at me and be like, hey man, what the fuck? And a lot of social situations through social media would be improved, and I hate to say it this way, if you could just punch a person in the face. Because then they wouldn't fucking spout off all that shit.
I mean, there is a theory to, like, if you were having to face someone and say those things all the time, I don't think a lot of them would.
Right.
So you're right. I think there is something to, nobody's ever going to know it's me, so I'm going to pretend that I'm more badass than I actually am. But when I met you in person, I'd be like, oh man, yeah, that was great. No, or you just keep your mouth shut.
Right.
Because you know that's the right thing to do.
I do have to ask, and maybe I'm misconstruing here, but you seem to be a moderator for many Twitch streamers.
Less than I used to be, but yes.
Okay, but that I feel like that's a testament to your ability as a moderator. I mean, how is it something that you kind of sought out, or just people were like, no, this guy's good, get this guy to moderate, and then it just kind of seeped in?
I have only asked one person ever to be a moderator for them, and that was before I started dating them. So besides that, I have never asked someone to be a moderator, because I wholeheartedly think that anybody who asks to be a moderator shouldn't.
Yeah, I get that.
Because if you're asking to be a moderator, you want power. And the people that want power are the least ready to wield it.
True, yeah.
People who are asked to do something are taking it as a responsibility. Somebody who wants to do something is taking it as a privilege.
Sure. I get that.
Yeah. And you got to be careful who you have doing it too. So, I mean, that says something too. You've been around, you integrate enough. Like, hey, he's been around for several months. Never been weird, never been cross, never did this. Hey, yay.
And the two things that can sink a content stream faster than anything else are no moderation and bad moderation. Because the way that you moderate content is going to tell people that are looking at your content what kind of content it is. And I can understand people being loath to just start swinging the banhammer left and right because, oh man, I'm just driving people out of my community. You're driving the people out of your community that you don't want there in the first place. And when you let those people in and say, no, that's okay, just kind of tone it down later, maybe? That's so soft, they're just going to be like, I'm just going to walk all over this person. and then they bring the whole vibe of the room down.
Yeah, it can sink it quick for sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is the mentality, especially with a lot of newer people. Nobody wants to get rid of a view, no matter how horrible the person is. It's like they still think that they're trying to build something up. But to your point, you are. However, what are you trying to cultivate? That's something you're going to have to deal with for the longevity of your career as a streamer.
You can't build anything lasting on a rotten foundation.
No, yeah. So, I mean, even I did the same thing, I think, at first, where I was just like too okay with certain things. But then by the end, I never said anything. I would just do it and move on. Because my thing was, I don't even want to let chat know anything even happened that got under my skin or anything at all. I'd see it and I would just keep talking and I would hit ban and just keep on going like nothing had ever happened and moved on.
Because those people
they didn't
want
get
the
the
attention.
Satisfaction of my reaction. I'm getting rid of you so I don't have to hear you later on. And those of us who are here are fine. And we're going to keep on doing what we were doing. You know, best way to do it.
And that takes a certain level of confidence in yourself as a presenter that people just starting out don't necessarily have. It's really, really hard to sit down, hit go live, and know that you are streaming to literally no one.
Yeah.
You are just throwing your words and your gameplay out into the ether and hoping and praying that someone stumbles across it because, God, trying to find anyone new on Twitch is like trying to find a specific needle in a whole pile of needles. It's not even needle in a haystack.
And it's worse now than it was when I was streaming.
Oh, yeah.
It's like way harder now even than when I was streaming. And it was hard when I was streaming. And I mean, well, I never worked for Partner. I felt like they destroyed the Partner.
It doesn't feel like discoverability is something that Twitch has as a priority.
Yeah.
It feels like Twitch wants you to go elsewhere, cultivate a community, bring them to Twitch, and then they'll be like, hey,
oh, they do.
We'll give you partner, which is not even a better money split anymore. It's just a badge by your name that says, hey, you're a partner.
I can't do anything up until recently, though.
Yep.
Well, as soon as they did the affiliate program was when I thought they took the romance out of becoming a partner. Because at that point, I didn't have any different perks than a partner did.
Partners just had more emote slots.
Yeah,
potentially
basically.
a better
And
money
some
split if they were
partners-
huge.
I was going to say some. Yeah, you had to be like their top 1% of earners to get that. But yeah, at that point, I was like, what am I working for? You already gave me a sub badge. People are already subscribing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making half of that cash. I'm getting all of my tips and bits. When they put in bits, I'm like, what do I need to work for? I mean, I still wanted to grow my audience.
Right.
But like, what more can I get out of Twitch? So when people are like, I'm still partner grinding.
And Twitch is already making its cut off of you at that point, too.
Yeah. I was like, why? Like, I mean, if that's what you want, but like, you've got everything you would get as a partner now, and you could still stream elsewhere. Not at the same time. I know affiliates still couldn't multi-stream or whatever,
Right.
but like, they didn't care as much the next day if I streamed on like YouTube. Whereas a partner for a longest time, exclusive to Twitch, that's it. No live stream anywhere else, you know, up until like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
I guess,
2-3
when they
weeks
announced
ago.
that. But you still can't like integrate your chat. It's very weird.
2-3 weeks ago from the time of this recording, because I have no idea how long it's going to be in the can.
Right.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So within the last month or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I still find that funny because it's like, oh, you can't talk to any of the other ones though. I think everyone who was all excited about the multi-streaming missed that part where it was like, you can't integrate the chats on screen. So they want Kick to know you're on Twitch.
Yeah.
They want whomever YouTube to know you're on Twitch, but they don't want those other two to know that you're streaming to them. So I'm just saying before people get all excited.
Well, they want to drive all that traffic to their platform, right? Because they want those people on YouTube to feel like second-class citizens, so that way they come to Twitch and feel like they are part of the conversation now. Because such a big part of live streaming that people don't necessarily understand is the two-way interaction, which is why when Mixer was around before that bombed and died, the thing that it held up as its flag was you have instant communication with your streamer. The low latency mode
Faster
was
than light.
huge.
That was
Yep.
They still did it better, I think, even than the ones that have it now. Like, it was instant.
Yeah.
They hit enter. I saw your message. It was no lag. There was no 3 or 4 seconds or 10 seconds later or something. Yeah. I just hope all of the partners who got all excited about the multi-streaming paid attention to that part. You'll still get in trouble if you're integrating chats and putting it on your screen. You can't do it, which is defeating the purpose of integrating all of your chats. I guess just don't put it on screen anymore if you're that person.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
there will be a major outcry on Twitter, and nobody will change anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the first person who gets banned, what do you mean it was multi-streaming allowed? Like, you didn't
Yep.
see the asterisk and read the fine print, which you should always do in these kind of contracts because they
God.
just want money.
Mhm.
Come on, unless you're their top earner, they don't really care. You're just wasting their resources at this point because they've still got to host you.
Mm-hmm. There's a reason I'm not an affiliate.
Yeah, no, don't do it.
Out of curiosity, David, since you
Yes,
have
sir.
moderated quite a few channels,
Yes, sir.
what is the largest group you've had to moderate? Like,
Oh, this is going way back because Lacey, we've known each other for what, like 6-7 years at this point?
Probably.
Yeah.
Try to remember when I first started streaming. Like 2015, 2016, something like that. And then I did it for like 4 years till the Rona hit. Yeah.
Yep.
And then I just quit. Yeah. So that sounds about right. 8 years. Well, shit.
So thinking way back, I think the largest group I would have been moderated probably have been in like 200-300 people. That would have been when I was working with the 12 Days of Indie.
oh, yeah.
I was going to ask if it was 12 Days of Indie.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because they definitely, sometimes thousands.
Yep.
Yeah. That just follow the charity stream. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
I was wondering if you did that. I know I got to pick some, but then there were some that they just like, can you mod please? Because
Yeah, I did that for a
You're
couple of
good,
years, and
and-
then I didn't have time.
Yeah.
Because trying to do that while also working a full-time job is kind of rough.
it's a long time. It's a long commitment.
Yeah, and
12
props
days
to
is
everybody who
long.
does it because it's really important.
Yeah.
And it's a great charity.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, it's a long commitment.
Yep.
It's a long week and a half,
Oh, yes.
especially if you're an administrator.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I mean, just that one charity stream that we all kind of, I don't remember what it was
Yes.
for, but I remember that was a hectic week.
Mhm.
It
or a
was.
few weekend, maybe, I think it was.
And we only did the weekend. Yeah,
Yeah.
we did. I think it was just Friday, Saturday, Sunday,
Mhm.
and I was pooped.
It was just
I was just straight
nonstop.
up pooped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know I had something else going on that weekend too, but like we did so much better than I anticipated.
Sure.
Because I mean, it was the first time we had ever done anything. Epic wasn't really well known for anything. So I thought we would do okay, like a couple grand. I was not thinking we would more than double what we were trying to do. So the first day that we did it, I know I had to leave the house that evening for something else. I think I was doing some other kind of like Twitch talk or something with I Am Brandon, which I did not know was going to be with him until I got there. And then people were DMing me the whole time that we were running out of keys. And I'm like, how? We had hundreds of keys and we were supposed to be giving them away every $50. And they're like, yeah, we're out of keys. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. So I remember talking to Brandon and then he was really cool and sent me some more on Twitter. Like, but that was when it hit me. I was like, oh my God. And I'm getting pings at like 2 a.m., because it was
Yep.
24.
Yeah.
It's like, we're running out of this. We need that. So I was exhausted because I just never could sleep. Because it made sense. I was leading the whole thing. So of course, come to me. And when certain things would happen or whatever, and I'd get out of bed. I'm like, fine, I'll see if I can help you figure it out at like 3 a.m. But yeah, I was very happy about that. I can't believe we did so well.
It was very interesting. It was definitely the first time I'd ever been involved in something like that. So it was something.
It was something. It's a lot of work.
It always feels really good when those charity streams just blow up.
I,
Because you're always...
and I still...
You're always going with that expectation of, all right, we're going to try to do something awesome, but it could completely collapse. And I just have to be okay with that and just get over the disappointment. And then when it goes in completely the other direction and just explodes and goes way beyond your wildest dreams, it feels so great to raise that much money for people who really need it.
Yeah.
I was definitely riding high that next week because I just couldn't believe we pulled something like that off. I'd never even tried. And I had done 12 Days of Indie, I think, like once. So
Yep.
I'd kind of seen just a little bit of the behind the stuff. So I was not anticipating for it to... I'm not saying I thought it would bomb, but I just definitely didn't think we'd make $8,000 that weekend.
Yeah.
And I could have made more. Here's my pro tip. Read your notes. I did not. On my one Just Dance stream, like I saw the number would pop up, but I did not have the screen open for people who actually attach notes to their donation. Didn't even know it was a thing yet. So this person's probably like, she is such a moron. But as soon as I saw it, like the next day, the person who donated like $400 said, and I will continue to match every donation from here till the end for the next hour. And I was so upset at myself for never seeing that note.
Oh.
Because I could have said it. I'm sure that was what the person was trying to do. Like, say this note on stream. So every time I'm going to match it.
Yep.
Damn. Damn. So if you're doing that, remember there's a whole other screen. There might be something different now. It's been several years. There's a whole screen you should leave up for your tip dono so you can read the notes. So do that if you're running a charity stream, because I kick myself still to this day for not seeing that note. But the kids could have had more money, man. That's all I know, because we were doing it for Child's Play.
Hey, you did good. You did good.
Oh, it still went well.
Yes.
It still went well.
Mm-hmm.
But read your notes
Yes.
in real time.
So, Daeva, let's talk about why you're here, because the other thing that we wanted to do for any guests that we have on, as we say, we talk about whatever is on our mind, whatever we want to talk about. It's a free-for-all. So we wanted to talk about something that you're passionate about, and you mentioned tabletop games.
I did.
And this is not something that I'm very familiar with. Like, I know of them. I see that they're very popular now. So I guess my big question is explain to me what the passion is for tabletop games for you, because I'm curious.
Okay, so this is going to be a really big topic because there's two big buckets that we could be talking about here. We could be talking about tabletop board gaming. We could talk about tabletop role-playing gaming. Is there a particular bucket you'd like me to talk about first, or do you want me to just give the broad overview of why would you get around a table with 4 other people and play a game?
Like IRL.
We could probably, because when you say tabletop gaming, initially, I guess my brain would say, oh, you mean like a board game, like Monopoly or something like that. But it's not necessarily that.
That's true.
Because there are different facets of it. So I guess start broad and then maybe kind of dig deep into it so I understand, and maybe the audience will understand the difference.
Right. Okay. So, especially living now in an era where you have a billion video games on your computer, or your PS5, or your Xbox are you even on now, Series X, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're still on X. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the big appeal to tabletop gaming is the social aspect of it. Being in a space with people that you presumably like enough to want to be in a space with them for an hour or several hours doing an activity together.
Sure.
And then you're interacting sometimes with a physical thing in the space of a board game. Sometimes you're interacting with something that is purely in your minds, like in a tabletop role-playing game where you don't necessarily have a board or miniatures. Although you can use those things, they help. But the social aspect of tabletop gaming is really the biggest draw for me. That I can get people together and have a shared experience with them for a span of time, depending on the game. And there's an extremely broad range when we're talking about time frames. There are some games that you played in 2 minutes. There are games that we played in 8 hours. Proper game of diplomacy takes like a week. I am not exaggerating as much as I should be.
But that's in line with RPG type games. I mean, I always hear D&D campaigns can take days, weeks, months.
Even if you want to keep going and everyone didn't die, I guess, you know.
So the last D&D campaign that I ran, we played every other week, and it ran for 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. See, I love that though.
How many hours each time you played?
3 to 3.5, 3, 4, somewhere around there. So
wow.
And factor
I
in
love
some
that.
breaks for, holidays or just people being absent. And we'll call it around 140 times we got together, multiplied by 3 hours. That's 420 hours. Blaze
A
it.
lot.
Wow.
Nice. I love that though. Like
Yeah.
how creative you all have to be able to keep a campaign going that long, and good too, because nobody died. I'm assuming.
Oh, no, people died.
Just roll a new character or something. I don't know.
Well, that depends. We can get into that. Because how
Yeah.
you respond to character death is really a important thing to talk about in your campaign, and every game is a little different. But to circle back around to Steven's actual question, yeah, it's all about the social for me.
As I kind of mentioned, there's different facets to these games. Like I continually see today, I think Fright Rags is one of those sites that I frequent very often, and they've gone from doing clothing and things like that. Now they're doing tabletop board games based on Halloween, Chucky, whatever.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
from me standing over here, I'm just like, well, what am I getting into? Like what kind of game are you making here? So, are you drawn to any kind of specific games like that, or anything goes for you?
Everybody has their tastes, right? There are
Mhm.
themes that are going to draw you in. There are themes that are going to push you away. And I certainly have themes that draw me in. I'm a sucker for Cthulhu things. If you can see over my head,
Okay.
Arkham Horror. That's
Yep.
Oh,
one
yeah,
of the flagship Cthulhu games. I also am a big fan of science fiction themes and fantasy themes. And then there are games that just take their theme and run with it, like Abomination: The Heir of Frankenstein, which I think you
Mhm.
would enjoy, Stephen, because it's set, I think, 20 or 30 years after Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in Paris.
Okay.
And you're playing as a bunch of scientists that are trying to recreate Dr. Frankenstein's work.
Okay.
That sounds fun. And
Because-
it's played like a D&D game, kind of?
Not exactly, no.
Oh, okay.
There's a very light roleplay aspect in that each character or each player is given a different character identity to be, which has a different ability. But that's more of a way to give each player a unique mechanical thing rather than something that you would roleplay out. But you still have decisions to make, not just in the mechanical game space, but one of the things that game does that's fun is part of the setup of the game is that the creature that Frankenstein built is still alive and has come to Paris to try and get these scientists to recreate his work so that he can have a counterpart, a mate, more people like him. And he's being pursued by Captain Walton from the novel. And every so often, you'll have cards come out of a deck that have events happen where the creature might show up at your lab and try and convince or cajole or threaten you into continuing your work. Or you'll have an encounter with Captain Walton, or something else will happen in the streets. It's a very macabre game. There's certainly some artwork on there that's pretty dark. There's a board space dedicated to going and committing a murder in a back alley. So
Okay.
that's the kind of thing we're talking about.
A whole board dedicated to it?
A whole
That's
space on the
great.
board, yes.
Oh, a whole space on the board. Okay.
So, do a
And-
lot of these games have mechanics like that, where it's cards and dice and like I'm trying to think of other games to compare it to that I might know, but they're different enough to where it's not quite that.
So, because we are in a golden age of board gaming right now, I can say that if you can think of a mechanic, it's probably in a board game somewhere.
Oh,
There
wow,
is
okay.
such a broad depth and breadth of mechanics in board games right now. Because when you heard me say board games, first thing that popped in your head was like Monopoly, right?
Right.
So Monopoly is like not even from NES to Series X. Monopoly is like Pong. It's
Okay.
so
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
just back and basic. And I mean, people love it, mostly because they get the rules
Mhm.
wrong.
Yeah.
There's no money
True.
every card makes
there.
I have. Yeah, there's a lot you find out later on. Like, we always played it this way. How did we not know?
Right.
Oh god, the house rules I've heard on Monopoly, it's staggering how to a single rule they all make the game worse. But
Yep.
people will
Mhm.
defend them with their lives because that's the way they play, damn it.
Yep.
Always.
And I guess if everybody at the table agreed to a rule, screw it.
Yeah.
I guess at that point, right? Just play.
Yeah, and that's getting
you're
back to
right
the
about
social aspect. The rules are
Yeah.
not there for you to beat each other about the head with. The rules are there to
Hmm.
build a space where collectively we have all agreed to these things, so that way we know how to go through this process and have fun without having to stop and trip over each other and argue about, no, you're supposed to do it this way. No, I do it this way. No, the rules say this, but the rule I always play with says this. And that's an important thing to discuss together as a group before you start doing any social activity, really, is set
Sure.
the groundwork so that way you can all just focus on having fun.
Hmm. Have you ever encountered one of these newer board games where the rules feel more complicated than they need to be? Like where
Oh, God,
you
yes.
to where you're okay.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I can imagine.
There are
I've
some
wondered.
games that will just throw rules complexity at you for the sake of throwing rules complexity at you. And you're an hour in and you're just flipping through the rule book and you're like, I have no idea what this thing is trying to get me to do. Why is this so arcane? And part of that is that there's an art to writing rule books. You have to communicate what you're trying to get across in a way that the player can understand it without you being in the room to explain it to them. And some people
Yeah.
are really good at that, and some people are very much not good at that.
Or taking pride in making it so complex. Like, well, you want people to play though.
Yeah.
Or make up their own rule, like you just said. You know what? I don't know what it wants me to do, so just roll. And if you get a 10, we're good, right?
Sometimes you
Everyone
just
agree?
have
Cool.
to try and forge something out of the mess that you've been given.
Yep. It's as fun as you make it, I imagine.
So have you ever looked into, like, have you ever seen a Kickstarter campaign for any tabletop games that have just like, you committed to it and said, I want this, I really want this? And
Yes, and I'm still waiting for it to
donated?
deliver 3 years from now.
Oh, shit.
Oh no.
I've backed a couple Kickstarters. I just backed one. What was that? Tuesday? For I don't really want to give them a plug because they're not paying for it, but it was a game that I saw and immediately was like, that's a cool concept. The price is where I want it to be. I'm going to grab it.
Mhm.
It helped that they had
Yeah.
a Cthulhu expansion because, as we noted, I'm a sucker for Cthulhu.
Nice. Yeah.
But
yeah.
yes, board game Kickstarter is absolutely a thing, and it can be very dangerous because you can see those games being like, "Hey, here's the regular version for $50. Here's the special deluxe Kickstarter only version for $100." And the special deluxe Kickstarter only version has 4 cards in it that will never be in any other version of the game. So if you don't have this, you don't have the complete, true, final version of the game. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Sure.
before you know it, you spend $300 on a game that you're going to play twice. Because it
See,
appeals to
that's
you
what-
and to no one else.
That's what fascinates me is just how expensive they've gotten as well. And they probably always were, and my child brain just never really put 2 and 2 together, that these games are that expensive. But when I started to really come to the realization, 50, 60, $100, it's just like, damn. But there's a lot of pieces, so it kind of makes sense. But like, you still weren't thinking that you were making that kind of investment for a board game, like.
And it's not just that there's a
Maybe
lot of
to the
pieces,
normal
because
man.
wood pieces are relatively cheap. It's a lot of miniatures. Board games, especially in the past 20 years, have really leaned into let's put custom, real high-quality miniatures in there because they look really good on the table. And table presence is an important part of any game. Having that laid out in a space and having people walk up and say, "Oh my God, what is that? That looks awesome!" And then you can start explaining it to them and draw them in, and they may want to play. But
Yeah.
the miniatures that games have nowadays usually look really, really good, and you pay for it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that's fair.
So what would you probably call your favorite out of the ones you've played thus far? And why is it your favorite?
Oh, that is a question that I don't think you understood the depths that you're getting into, because I don't have favorites. I have favorites by player count.
Oh, okay.
Because
Oh, okay.
a game that's good for 2 players is not going to be necessarily good or even playable with 4 or 8 or 10. And
Sure.
player counts can go all over the place. I've seen board games, well, it's less a board game, more a card game at this point, that'll go up to like 100 people.
Ew. How?
Wow.
Who knows 100 people?
People at conventions know 100
I don't
people.
even know enough to fill a 4-1. All right, let's go.
Well, it's not just people you know, it's people you know who are willing to play with you. But again, conventions are a thing.
That's true.
And
Oh yeah, that's fair.
I've played some really big games at conventions before, and it's fun in a different way. But I can get into a couple different player counts. I suppose I can go as long as we want. Neither of you have anything to do today, right? Wink, wink.
No, go ahead.
It is what it is. Yeah, let's go.
Throw a couple numbers at me between 2 and 5.
Well, let's start with 2.
Okay. My favorite 2-player game is a little card game. I might have it here, but everybody's listening to this on audio, so they wouldn't see it anyway. You can look it up. It's called Hanamikoji. Hanamikoji. That means
Okay.
21 flowers in Japanese. It is a game about the 2 players are owners of competing theaters that are trying to entice geishas to come and perform at their establishments. And you do that by giving them gifts. So you draw from a shared deck of 21 cards, and one gets pulled off at the start of the round, so there's no perfect information. You can't just card count. And players go back and forth taking turns, and on your turn you perform exactly one action. And you have 4 different actions you pick from, and once you've done an action, you can't do it again for the rest of the round. And they are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. They involve that many cards, and each action does different things with the cards. So the one action, you take a card from your hand and just put it face down on the table, and you'll play that at the end of the round as a secret surprise card. The two action, you take 2 cards from your hand, put them face down on the table, and those are just out of the round. You're just discarding them. They're trash. You don't want them. You don't care. The 3 action, you take 3 cards from your hand and put them face up on the table. Your opponent takes one of them and plays it for themselves, and then you play the other 2. So you're getting an advantage in terms of how many cards you're playing, but your opponent gets an advantage in terms of getting to pick before you get the rest. And then the 4 action, you take 4 cards, split them into 2 pairs, and your opponent takes one of those pairs, and you take the other one.
All right.
And the cards are all labeled for a specific geisha. There are 7 geishas on the table, and they're numbered from 2 to 5. That number is both how many cards they have in the deck and how many points they're worth. If you have a majority of cards next to a geisha at the end of the round, you get control of that geisha. If it's a tie, control doesn't move, and that's important. After you total up those majorities and move control, if someone controls 4 geishas or 11 points worth of geishas, they win. If one person has 4 geishas, the other one has 11 points. Points matter more than quantity. If neither player's managed to do that...
Points matter more than people? Psh, it's like how we treat people with cash these days.
Well, the higher points is the more charm that they have. It's the more people they're going to draw in. So if I have fewer geishas, but they're the highest quality ones, then people are going to want to come into my establishment. Whereas if you've got all the 2s, then you've got a bunch of great performers, but they're not as good as mine. But if somebody hasn't managed to complete either 4 geishas or 11 points worth, all the control markers stay where they are. And then you play another round just reversing who goes first. Theoretically, this can go back and forth forever, but in practice, usually the second round decides it. But the point that I made about if it's tied, it stays put matters in the second round, because if I control a geisha, tying me doesn't actually move it. I'll still control it. If you want to take the geisha from me, you have to actually beat me. So there's a lot of depth of strategy in a game that's very, very small.
Yeah,
because it's 21 cards, 7 tarot-sized cards, and then just a few markers to denote control. And it plays about 15 minutes, and every time it is immensely satisfying to offer these choices to your opponent. And sometimes you're going to offer them a really dumb choice, like here's 3 of the same card, pick one. And sometimes you're going to offer them really interesting choices, like here's a pair of cards and then a 5. Do you want to break this pair up so that way it's tied? Maybe you have the third one that you can sneak in with your 1 and take control of that. Or do you want to just give me the 3 and try and gambit for the big one?
Wow. All right.
I would try it. I bet it sounds more complicated than if you had the stuff in front of you and were actually going through it as you're. Anyway, I'm that way. I learn by doing.
And you and I have played games in Tabletop Simulator before. Tabletop Simulator, for those of you who don't know, is a video game that essentially is a physics engine that you can load objects into. And that sounds fine until you realize that you can load objects in that have like images on them, like cards. And it will support you holding cards in your hand and hiding them from the other players and having zones that only you can see into. So now you can use all these tools to essentially build a board game from scratch in the engine and then load it up and have your friends come in and play with you. I think, Lacey, you and I played Lost Cities, right?
I think so. I want to say we played twice.
Yeah, it was another 2-player game.
Time, but yeah. And then we played Gremlins, but I don't think that was on.
No, Gremlins Inc. is
Tabletop.
its own video game that simulates a board game, which is another interesting space.
I thought it was a lot of fun.
It is.
That's another
super
one
fun.
that has a pretty steep learning curve, I think, because, my God, just the amount of options that you can come across. And he beat me every time. I don't think I won one.
So let's talk about Gremlins Inc. for a minute, because it's in an interesting space. There is a print and play version. You can play this physically. It's not like Hearthstone or something where there's a computer there because it is driving randomness that you could not recreate through your own physical means. All you would need is the board, some movers, tokens to keep track of money and points, a single 6-sided die, and then a stack of cards. Actually, 2 stacks of cards, but who's counting? But I've always described Gremlins Incorporated as, it's like Monopoly, except it's not bad. Because Monopoly is an actively bad game. Sorry for anybody who likes Monopoly.
Yeah. In the grand scheme of things,
Yeah. So you are moving around a board, and the board is filled with all kinds of interesting spaces. There are big spaces that you can go to for specific actions. There are little spaces along the way that will do things as you cross or stop on them. But you're not moving by rolling dice, because that's really boring and random, and it doesn't actually really get you anywhere. The game is playing you at that point rather than you playing the game.
Mhm.
You move by playing the cards in your hand, because they have little dice icons on them that tells you how far you can move by playing that card. And you move exactly that far, but you can always stop on the big spaces. So you don't necessarily need, I don't have a 1 in my hand, so I guess I have to make a full circuit of the board to stop at this space to play my card. No, you can stop at big spaces. But the cards also have things you can do at specific spaces printed on them. And if you play a card to move, you're not playing it for its space effect. So now you have to start thinking about the economy of the cards in your hand. This card is really good, but it also has a really high move value. Do I need to go that far and lose this card for being able to score points or get money or screw over another player? Because, of course, screwing over another player is part of being a gremlin. And the theme is really neat because the board... It's a board that would look okay in a physical space, but it looks really good on a computer where it can move and churn. The boards are made to look like they are inside bits of clockwork. So you can see gears and cogs spinning in the background because you were playing as gremlins, which, for those of you who aren't aware, gremlins was a blanket term for things going wrong mechanically in like World War II and beyond. So the mechanics imagined that there were little demons in the...
Little gremlins in there.
Yes, screwing things up and breaking shit.
I still use that, so I must be old. I guess the gremlins got to my audio today.
It's funny that term probably isn't used as much, or maybe it is and I just don't hear it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it seems like it's very of the times from the 40s, reintroduced in the 80s, and then it's just like, well, do we even say that anymore? Now it's just tech issues or whatever.
Right.
Except for gremlins.
Yep.
Or people think of the movie.
But who remembers that anymore? It makes me feel bad because we're talking about a movie that came out and I know and love, but it's 30, almost 40 years removed now, and people are not remembering.
We'll reboot it at some point. It's fine.
Maybe.
I'm surprised we haven't already.
I'm also surprised that we haven't.
Era.
Because, gosh, Gizmo is just marketable as hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. But
I fell for it.
We did have that animated series that no one ever talked about.
That's true.
That came out on Max.
That's true.
That animated series that I forgot
it.
existed until you mentioned it, yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
I mean, I thought it was fine for what it was. It was interesting. But
Yeah.
not the gremlins I was looking for, but it worked.
Right.
I was like, all right.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
I'm
yeah.
gonna go back and watch that. It's been a while.
Like I said, it's worth a watch, I guess. I mean, it's not bad. It's not like,
it's
oh
not
my
like
God,
awards.
but it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it was entertaining for what it was. Anyway, you mentioned the 2-player game. Now, the game Gremlins, that was how many players?
You can play 2 to 6, I think. I will say that it's not great at 2 because there are some cards in there that are designed to pick another player and do bad things to them. So at 2 players, you're always picking the other player. And if you're already ahead, you're just pushing the other guy further into the mud. And 3-player can get kind of funky because you end up with a 2 versus 1 kind of dynamic there. And
someone's bullying.
Yeah.
We're all ganging up.
I feel like that's playing Uno with just 2 people. Sometimes it's just like, it's not going to be that fun because draw 4, draw 2, we know how this is going to go. And it's just skip, skip.
Reverse, skip,
win.
reverse.
Yeah, reverse
skip,
and skip are the
it's
same
always my
thing.
turn.
Yeah.
So, I guess with this type of social situation that comes with these games, have you encountered any negative situations? Like, I don't know, people that didn't care for the rules, people who just kind of made a fuss over something, or have your experiences been positive? Mostly.
Well, you always have those times when somebody is just having a bad day and they got together to play a game and it's not going the way that they wanted, and they just, it gets to them. And I've certainly experienced my own fair share of that, but I will say that most of my experiences have been positive, and part of that is because I curate the group that I play with.
So would you kind of consider yourself the Would you call it Dungeon Master? I mean, I know that's a D&D thing, but what is
Right.
what is the term for?
I mean, not exactly. It's more like I'm not going to bring them a game that they're going to react negatively to.
Right. Okay.
And part of that is just having an awareness of what the game is going to entail. And reading the rulebook usually gives you a sense of that. Sometimes it doesn't because the rulebook is badly written, as we mentioned before. But it's also something that you have to cultivate from just getting a sense of what your friends are into. And unfortunately, the best way to do that is to just play games with them and see what doesn't work.
Fair. Yeah.
Lace, do you have any deep questions about board games? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I don't know, like anything
Tabletops?
deep. I'm always just interested to hear if there's one I'm going to like, because I keep trying to convince the hubs to play more, and I'll get them to do it for like a day or two, and then it's gone for months. And I'm like, come on, man, I really want to play some of these, and you're the only human in my life. So can you just get on board?
Did he bounce off of Jaws of the Lion? I remember you two were having fun with that for a little while.
Yes, and then we're in an instance now that either we're just playing too impatiently. I mean, clearly we're playing too impatiently because the game is set up to be able to work with 2 players. But we just keep getting floored on this one scenario, and he's like, I think we need more players. And I'm like, no, I think we just need to play better. We just need to pay attention better and have more of a strategy on where our 2 characters need to go and all this kind of stuff. So it's still sitting on the kitchen table. Like, he's like, we'll come back. It's been like a month. I'm like, we need to put these away. They're just going to get dusty now and gross. And but yeah, I think it was the 3rd scenario.
Oh, wow.
Feel like it was 3rd or 4th, like not far along at all. So I think he just does it to make me happy for a couple of hours, and I don't think he cares at all. It's a shame.
So for those
tries,
of us who
he
are not
tries.
intimately involved in this conversation, the game that we're talking about is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. And
Oh, yes.
this is a game for 2 to 4 players where you are playing as adventurers in the town of Gloomhaven, which is I hate to say it, but a generic fantasy town. It has its own charm and world, but it's something that you have to really care about and take the time to drill down into to get all the nuance of it. And you can see this nuance in the characters because they're all these weird and crazy fantasy races. The 4 characters in the box, there's a guy who throws axes that has horns and looks vaguely demonic. There's a guy with a shield and a sickle on a chain who also looks vaguely demonic. There's a a shorter person with giant powered brass knuckles that looks like they're about to just throw bombs and cause chaos. And then
That's me. That's who I played.
And then there's a human with half of her face missing who has been embraced by the void. And
That might have been him.
oh, I can understand why you two were struggling if those were the 2 characters that you picked, because
I think he did something kind of healer, and I was just smash. And like it made sense when I'm usually always the healer. I'm like, you know what? This time I want to be the one destructing things, and when I could break rocks and boulders and stuff. I'm like, that's got to be a good intimidation tactic in front of them. And be right, like, you just saw me break this. What now? What are you gonna do? And then they fire me or something.
Yeah. So the game plays out in a series of scenarios where you always have a goal in mind, and there are enemies that are popping up to try and stop you. And the enemies are not run by a person like they would be in, say, Dungeons and Dragons. They are run by a deck of cards that has behaviors that they do. And you shuffle the deck and you draw a card off of it every turn. And some of the cards on there will tell you to reshuffle the deck. So you can have a sense of how their logic is going to go for a couple turns, and then it'll get reshuffled and you have no idea. And you're roaming around playing cards to move around and to attack stuff. And every card you have has both a top action that is usually attacking and a bottom action that's usually movement based. You play 2 cards and you do the top action of one and the bottom action of the other. And the cards also have initiative numbers on them, and you put them down in such a way that one of them is on top and that's your initiative number. But you can't talk about that with the other players. And you don't know what initiative the monster is going to go on. And going before the monsters isn't necessarily better, because it depends on how your positioning on the board is.
Yeah.
And you can talk about things in vague terms like, oh, I'm going to go really late this round. So if you need to do something really early, go ahead. But, I mean, I suppose there's nobody holding a gun to your head and saying, don't say 23! Don't say 23!
Yeah.
So you could just say, hey, I'm going on 23, you go on 50. But that does kind of break the spirit of the game a little bit.
Yeah. It was funny because they do mention, like, you can strategize, but... And I'm like, but I don't I don't know if I understand how to strategize if I'm not really allowed to tell you what I'm gonna do. So yeah, you're just gonna watch, I guess, at this point. We'll see what happens. You know,
That's
we probably ended
one
up
of the
cheating and been
interesting.
Like, you know what
social
we're gonna do
things
this
around it.
time?
Yeah, that's one of the
Yeah.
interesting social things around games like that. Is sometimes you have to kind of go with what the game is trying to tell you, rather than doing the exact knife edge optimal thing, because the exact knife edge optimal thing breaks the spirit of the game. It's supposed to be a combat. It's a melee. It's chaotic. You can't just sit down for 5 minutes and have a powwow and perfectly plan your strategy every.
Right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But there has to be some acceptable break from reality at some point too, because going in the completely opposite direction would just mean, all right, I'm just going to throw cards out and we'll see what happens. And if you do that, you usually just die.
Because you also lose cards that can never be played again eventually after each turn too. So and you just have to pick one at random, and it breaks your heart. You could either give up a hit point to keep it and like discard another one, or you just got to get rid of it and then hope you didn't need that the next battle.
Or you
Which is
plan
where
better
I
and take
always end up
long
getting
rests instead of
screwed.
short rests.
Yeah, we probably don't really rest.
So what Lacey is
We
talking about
should.
there is a mechanic in there. You have a hand of cards for each character, and you're playing 2 of them around, and they go in your discard pile. When you run out of cards in your hand, your discard pile doesn't just automatically jump back into your hand ready for the next round. You have to actually do something to make that happen. And there are 2 things you can do with that. A short rest is something you do between turns to just get all your cards back, but you lose one at random, as Lace just said. And once it's lost, it's gone for the rest of the scenario. You can't get it back in any way. And it's completely random. That could be your best card. It could be the card that you absolutely need in this situation. So if you happen to burn that card, you can lose a hit point to burn a different one instead. But you don't have a ton of hit points to be throwing around, especially if you're the 2 squishes characters in the box.
I have 8
Yeah. I
8
think
hit points.
I think the Void Warden has like 9.
because I'm only like level 2.
Yeah. So the other alternative is you can long rest, which lets you pick the card that you lose, and you regain a couple hit points. But it also means you lose an entire turn. And this whole outcome happens at the very end of that turn. So all the monsters get to do stuff without you being able to interact with them in any way. And a lot of that do stuff can be just hitting you. And when they hit you, they can do a whole lot of damage. And one of the big ways you can mitigate damage is by burning a card out of your hand. But if you don't have any cards in your hand, then you can't burn any out of your hand, obviously. So if you're stuck long resting and somebody smacks you for half your hit points, you just have to stand there and take it if you don't have any cards.
Yeah.
So a big part of the pacing of Gloomhaven is figuring out when to rest and whether you should short or long. Ideally, you want to find natural gaps that you can just sneak a long rest in, so that way you can have your cards and control what you lose, get some hit points back, so that way you can sustain yourself a little bit and keep your tempo going. But sometimes you're just in a moment where I have to go full burn all the time. I have no reprieve, and I just have to short rest and hope. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a
Hopefully
very
they miss
interesting
or
game.
something. Yeah. Yeah. I want him to play it a little bit more, hopefully, but we'll see.
So as I'm listening to you guys talk about this,
Yes, sir.
and even a lot of the games that you've been talking about prior to this,
Mm.
there's a level of complication. Like, I hear what you're saying,
Right.
and I'm trying to follow along. So for someone like me,
Mhm.
who really has never played these type of games, would there be one that you could recommend as far as a, I don't want to say simplistic, but a
Like
good
an introduction.
entry point
Yes,
tabletop game that would...
There's a whole genre called gateway games, which are
Okay.
games that have a little lower in the complexity scale, that are made to kind of let you dip your toes in. And I don't know if anybody ever designed something specifically to be a gateway game. They probably just designed it to be fun, and if it happens to be light in a gateway, that's great. The old standby Holy Grail gateway game was Catan, which was released as the Settlers of Catan in 1998, 99, somewhere around there. And it still holds up today. Have either of you heard of Settlers of Catan? I'm sure you've heard the name at least somewhere.
Yeah, the name rings
I
a
feel
bell.
like, yeah, I've heard the name, and that's it.
If you had seen the board laid out, you'd probably be like, oh, I've seen that design before. It's a bunch of hex tiles with little numbers on them, and the tiles all have different landforms on them. There's 6 different landforms because 5 of them produce resources, and the tile at the center of the board is a desert. And the players have little wooden houses and little wooden sticks for roads. and bigger wooden houses for advanced settlements. And you put these houses and sticks down on the board to make your starting towns and roads. And you're trying to collect resources to build up more roads and build your towns and settlements to get points. And every turn, whoever's turn it is going to roll 2 dice to figure out what spaces on the board will produce. So obviously rolling 2 dice gives you a curve from 2 to 12, and it's a bell curve. So some results in the middle are more common than the ones in the outliers. The most common result is 7. Nothing produces on 7. Instead, when you roll a 7, there's this little robber pawn on the board. He's a dick.
Oh, no.
The robber will go to a space that he isn't currently on. Whoever rolled the 7 gets to pick where the robber goes. And then if the robber is sitting on a space, it doesn't produce anything because the robber steals everything it produces. Also, when the robber goes on a space, if someone has a settlement or a town next to that space, you get to steal a card out of their hand.
I'm just impressed he can remember all of the rules for all of these games, man.
It's a lot of repetition.
Like, I'm going to have to read Gloomhaven again before we try again. Like, sorry, but please go ahead. I'm so
good.
impressed.
I would show you my notes, but they don't exist.
They're all up here, man.
Yeah, steel trap, man.
So after you roll and produce resources, everyone gets a chance to trade with the player whose turn it is. And you can offer whatever kinds of trades you want. You have resource cards in your hands, and you can say, hey, I've got some wheat here. I need some brick from you. You want a wheat for your brick? And they might say, I do need wheat, but my brick is more valuable than your wheat. Give me 3 wheat for that brick. And then they'd be like, 3 wheat? Who do you think you are? 2 wheat, tops. Or a wheat and a wood. And
I love this bartering system.
yes. And that is the heart of the game, is the bartering and the trading. Because the only way to get resources is to get them off a dice roll, trade with other people, or you can trade with, it's called border trading. I think, I'm going to have to double check because it varies based on the version of Catan that you're playing. But in base Catan, you can trade 4 of any resource for 1 of any other thing. Or if you have a settlement next to a corner of the board, some of them have specific resources. You can trade it 2 to 1, like 2 sheep for something else. And then there's a couple that you can unlock 3 of any one thing for something else. So if you're just flooded with one thing, you can trade them off and get the things that you need to get moving. But the things that are valuable are different depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you're trying to build a ton of roads, you need bricks and you need wood. But if you're trying to build up a bunch of settlements, now you need ore and wheat to build up those towns into big settlements with stone buildings and feed all the people that are flocking to them. So as the game goes on, what is valuable and what is trash switches around, and it's a real interesting dynamic.
Interesting. I was looking it up. There's DLC. There's expansions.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Like, this is fun.
Board games and expansions go together like peanut butter and jelly. If you can imagine an expansion, it probably exists. And expansions is another way that your wallet can just obliterate itself instantly because you see a game and you think, hey, this is really cool. I want a little more of it. And then you see that it's 7 expansions and you think, oh, okay, well, I guess I want the whole experience. So I'm going to buy them all. And
wow.
Yeah, that's how you turn a $30 purchase into a $150 purchase.
Real quick. That's what they want.
Yep.
I mean, I knew they did card deck expansions, but board game tabletop expansions. So, I mean, we're talking like, I guess, new campaign stories. Like, how does that work exactly? Like, what are you adding in?
It depends from game to game. Some games, you add an expansion that completely changes the experience. First one that popped into my head was a game called Dune Imperium, which is based on the newer Dune film from Denis Villeneuve. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I sincerely apologize. But it is all right, I'm going to say some terms, and you're going to look at me blankly and say, what the hell does that mean? So I'm going to say them, and then I will define them. It is a worker placement deck building game. There are the blank stares right now. So
what the hell does that mean?
I know what all of those words mean.
So let's start with worker placement. So a worker placement game is a game where you have little pawns. Usually they're called meeples, like me people. And Meeple is also kind of a uniform shape. You've probably seen it. It's just a little dude with his arms out and his legs out, and it's kind of stumpy. I'll send you a picture later. You'll probably look at it and be like, hey, I know what that is, or what the hell is this?
Yeah.
But you have these little pawns, and you put them on spaces on the board to do things. And generally speaking, in a worker placement game, once you've placed a worker on a space, that space is done. So that builds up a immediate tension, because if I go to the space that you want, well, you can't go there. So what are you going to do now?
Can't even go around you?
No, that space is done. It's locked. It's over. I mentioned
All right.
Abomination earlier. That is also a worker placement game, but one of the things you can do in that game is you can pay the person whose space, or the person who's on that space, you can pay them money to bump their worker off. And
You can
so
pay the toll.
you just buy them off. But there's a limit to how many times you can do that per round, and one of the spaces doesn't allow bumping at all because it lets you steal the first player marker. But getting back to Dune, Dune Imperium has 2 expansions, and they both radically change the gameplay. It's a really, really fun game that I cannot sell completely without taking about 2 hours to explain it, and I don't think anybody has time for that. But it's a very, very interesting game. And I've talked about worker placement. The deck building. In a deck building game, you start with a deck of basic cards. And these cards generally have ways to generate resources on them that you can use to buy other cards. And that way you are building up a deck over time. And then when you've run through your deck, you reshuffle your discard in a new deck. When you buy cards, they generally go in the discard pile. So you buy a card and you have it available to you next cycle. And then your deck is evolving and growing over time. And there's generally also ways to get cards out of your deck, so that way you can thin it down to just the good stuff rather than the crap starter cards you start with, and so on. Dune Imperium changes that up slightly by having the cards also dictate where you can put your workers on the board. So when you're taking a turn, you're either playing a card to place a worker down based on the symbols on that card, or you're saying, I'm done playing workers for the rest of the round. I'm just going to reveal the rest of the cards in my hand and then use the resources on those cards to buy stuff. Those resources can be, I forget what the actual term for it is because we never use it when we're playing the game, but they are points you can use to buy new cards, or they can be combat points that you use to try and win a conflict, because Dune is obviously all about the conflict over Dune, the desert planet of Arrakis. So every round there's a conflict going on that you commit troops to. And when the troops are committed to the conflict, they're gone. Regardless of win, lose, or draw, those troops are dead. They all just get swept at the end of the round. But regardless of that, whoever wins the conflict will get a reward based on the conflict. And there's first, second, and third place, although if you're playing with 2 players, you don't obviously use third place. So those conflict cards can have some interesting outcomes because you usually want to win. But sometimes you really want that second place reward. So you're trying to get in there and be strong, but not too strong. And
That's
everybody
gotta be
else
hard.
can see that you're going for that, so they might want to kind of limp in and be like, hey, I want that second place reward, so I'll be even less strong than you. And
Oh, no.
there's a lot of interesting dynamics around that. But that's the base game. The first expansion is called Rise of Ix. Ix is the technological planet in the Dune universe, and that adds a whole new board space that kind of sits off to the side. It adds another little tile that replaces one of the spaces on the base board, covers up a whole section of the board, so that way you don't use that section that's covered up. It's replaced by a whole new thing. It replaces buying and selling spice with a shipping track. And it also adds in technology tiles that you can buy that give you permanent bonuses for the game. And you also can buy dreadnoughts that supplement your ground troops. And dreadnoughts don't go away after they fight in a conflict. If they lose, they just come back to your garrison and are ready to be sent out again, because what dude with a blaster pistol is going to shoot down a starship? That's obviously ridiculous. But if a dreadnought wins a conflict, instead of coming back to your garrison, it goes to a board space to let you take control of that space. That doesn't mean that other people can't go there. It means when they go there, you get a benefit. And then after it controls that space for a round, it comes back to your garrison. So these dreadnoughts have a natural ebb and flow where you can deploy them to be more powerful because they are more powerful than ground troops. But if you win a fight with them, you can't use them next round. So are you winning something important with them where you can afford to lose them for a round? Or do you need to hold them back for something that's going to score you actual points?
The strategy.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It's a super, super interesting experience.
I'll never be able to talk him into it.
But just the fact that it changes the dynamic, I don't know why I can't say that word, the dynamic of the game so much. Is,
Well, you're having a Carrie Elwes moment?
Yeah, apparently. Batad, I can't say batad. But anyway, the whole thing is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing someone talk about it with a passion helps me understand why people would get into it. Because, I mean, there are things I know that I'm passionate about that I could go on for hours and hours and hours about. And then yet, sometimes you get those people who look at you and be like, I don't know what you're
Good
going
for
on
you,
about.
man.
Yeah.
Like-
But then sometimes you can engage with someone and you hear that passion through a certain way and you can understand it, you know, and I feel like a lot of us can kind of connect on that. So while I guess I would have to be introduced to it, to play it, to really understand it. But I see the passion that you have for it because like you said, I mean, just like Lay said, you know all this stuff in your head, like rules and how everything kind of operates. And that's impressive to me. But again, I'm sure I could do the same with something else. I'm just not thinking about it. It's,
Right,
second nature. To you, it just seems like it's second nature.
I mean, I listened to your podcast. I've heard you talk about, say, Spider-Man 2 that you talked about recently.
Yeah.
You went into great detail about the depth of the systems in that game, just extemporaneously. I feel like that's a similar kind of thing where somebody who doesn't play video games might be sitting back and being like, well, that's dumb. Why would you want to hold a controller in your hand and watch Spider-Man get beat up until you get good enough to beat up the bad guys? Why can't I just watch a movie and watch him own everybody?
Sure.
It's a different experience. You get to immerse yourself in that world, and it can be kind of silly sitting hunched around a board and thinking that you're immersing yourself in that world, but a well-designed board game will make you feel like you are in that moment.
And I'm sure the people that you have like to commit to it to have that kind of fun also. I only ever had one game night ever with a group of people, and I think it was a Lord of the Rings RPG actually. The dude made a map. He had all of this stuff made out. We did it every Tuesday. It was a lot of fun, but we were all actors, so all of us just really would get into it and have a lot of fun. So yeah, you get the right people and everything involved, and it's a great time. It is a really good time.
Oh yeah, tabletop role playing is so much
I
fun.
genuinely think I could get into role playing, even though I've never really. I think I've played something. I can't remember the name of it, but a friend of mine, he had. I felt like it was a Marvel RPG tabletop.
There have been
style
several of
games.
those,
Sure there
yeah.
is.
But I can't remember what it was called. But it had like little figurine pieces of the characters, and I wish I could remember what it was called, but. I didn't commit to it very often because we didn't get together very often to do it, but the creativity of it all, the story experience, like you said, the immersiveness of it all sounds like something I could get into because much like a video game, the reason I'm playing Spider-Man and I'm excited about it is because I get to be Spider-Man. And if there's a way to be a character or some version of a character like that, in a game that I can just commit to, like Lace, you were talking about, you just, as actors, you committed wholeheartedly.
We had fun, yeah.
I see the fun in that. I see the appeal in that. I would love to do that. I don't have people to play with.
That's my problem also, Steven. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the social aspect of it, the biggest draw of tabletop role playing to me is that even when I'm running the game, I don't have to have an entire roadmap of how every little thing is going to go in my mind. Because if you come in with that expectation, you will usually be disappointed.
I was going to ask about that too, because if somebody you've kind of ran on that, how does that work? Like, how does the structure of that kind of come about? Because I feel like I would assume, like you said, you have to have some sort of roadmap, but I mean, I guess you can do it however you want to, like
Characters
a
can mess that up, yeah.
roadmap versus something that's a little bit more fluid on how you approach it.
The first thing I'm going to say is that every single person is different, and everybody runs things in their own way, and whatever works for your group is perfect. Keep doing that. So I can only talk about the way that I do things. That being said, In my experience, when you come in with a fully formed roadmap of, all right, we're going to do beat, 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 and we're going to go through these things in direct order, what Lacey said is exactly what's going to happen. The players are going to do something that you didn't anticipate, pull you completely off that track, and now you are in parts unknown without a map at all. And you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And that is the pitfall that I most often see beginning game masters, dungeon. Every game has a unique term for it. Game master, dungeon master, judge, storyteller, story guide, keeper.
MC.
Yes, MC.
Yeah.
That is also one that games use. I could go on. But when you're just starting out trying to run a game, it often feels like you need to be super crazy prepared and have a thought in mind for every single eventuality. That road is madness. If you try and do that, you will run yourself ragged and do 10 hours of prep for a 3-hour game. And some people are into that. Some people really enjoy having every single thing mapped out and crystallized, so that way you can be like, all right, the players decided to attack the doctor that they were trying to get treatment from their friend from. All right, I have a plan for that. Let's go. That's not my style. So I tend to go into games with more of an outline. I go in with broad strokes beats, things that I have a sense could happen. And the other thing I go in with is a sense of what the antagonists are going to do if they are unopposed. Because the antagonists are also generally people. They're people with goals and ambitions, and they don't think of themselves as the antagonist, because who thinks of themselves as the villain in their own story?
Sure.
From their perspective, they're the protagonists. They're trying to push their agenda along. So what I go in thinking about is, what is this person's agenda? How are they going to accomplish that? And when the players start disrupting these steps, how are they going to adapt? And sometimes you throw your players a hook and it just doesn't land. And that's fine. The players have to have the agency to say, no, we don't want to do this. Let's go do something else. And to me, it's really important as someone running a game to have the ability to say, sure, what do you want to do? And put the ball back in their court so they can drive the story, rather than me pulling them by the ear from place to place and saying, no, look at this. It's important. Interact with that stone, damn it.
Right.
And I think that's the
over there,
biggest thing that tabletop role-playing has over, say, a video game. Because even games like Baldur's Gate 3 that are trying to emulate the D&D experience, they are still limited by the scope of their programming.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of things in Baldur's Gate 3. There are a ton of experiences that you can have and a ton of different ways to handle problems, but you're still bound by the decisions that the game allows you to make. You can decide to attack the guard if you want to, but if you want to try and sweet talk the guard, you have the options that the game gives you to sweet talk the guard.
Both of you have played Baldur's Gate 3?
I have not.
I have.
You have not?
I have.
Okay.
No.
I feel like I would be done, but it's getting hard. I'm at Baldur's Gate.
Okay.
It's just taking me a very long time to finish this game.
I'd
Or
like to
one
play
run,
Baldur's Gate
anyway.
3. I just don't want to give Hasbro any money.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I was just curious because I know my sister-in-law, she's been trying to push it because she's apparently been playing the hell out of it, and she's just like, oh my God, all the things you can do. And I'm just like, well,
it is really good. I'm gonna say, anybody who knows me, one of my favorite games of all time was Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
So I'm getting kind of that itch scratched again with this mechanic. It's more detailed in Baldur's Gate than how Dragon Age did it.
Yes.
But I mean, we're talking many, many, many years apart difference too.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, like it was up my alley. It was definitely up my alley. So I recommend it. I'm not sure I've seen you play anything kind of like that, so I'm not sure. You might like it, Steven, but I'm not totally sure you would. Do you like turn-based gameplay?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not something I'm unfamiliar with. I mean, I've played my share of Final Fantasy turn-based type games. It's just...
We're talking more turn-based than even like Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy from 4 onward went to more of a real-time turn-based. You know all about the active time battle system.
Right.
Baldur's Gate 3 does not do that at all. Baldur's Gate 3 is, all right, it's your turn. Take as long as you need to do your turn. And you can do whatever you have the resources to do. And then once you do all of that, your turn will end. It'll be the enemy's turn. And you get to sit back and watch them do their thing. You have very limited means to react.
My only beef with the game is that so far, unless they patch it in, is that I cannot fast forward or make it quicker through the enemy's portion where other games in the past have had that function. So that is my one beef, because I am in an area now where my enemies are vast and many. We have a lot in one room. So once my turn is over, it's like you're beating me to death with it, where I'm just like, can we move it along so I can get to, and then if I die, oh my God, I got to do it again. So like, can we?
Come on, let's just throw a couple fireballs in there.
Faster.
Thin them out. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm trying. But they silence you or they blind you right
That's
off the
true.
bat because
That's
my
true.
initiative didn't get to go first. So now I'm like, well, crap,
So I guess the turn-based mechanic would Fire Emblem be a little bit more
Yes.
like akin to that? All right. So I know about what you're talking about, that type. But I don't know. I've looked into it. I've heard a lot of people talking about it, and I thought maybe, if it comes down on the price, and I just don't want to be cheap.
Yeah. Only suckers
Well,
pay
true.
full price for video games these days, especially on PC.
Oh yeah, this was probably the first time in a long time I actually, I guess, kind of for full price, but I don't know. I just thought everything about that team did it well and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of want to support that kind of video game development instead of some of the garbage we're getting a lot these days. Like it was a very well thought out story, lots of choices. That's choose your own story kind of games are like, I love those kind. And then with that strategy and then the fantasy element to it and everything, I just feel like a lot of what they did was right, and I want to encourage that. I want to encourage that style.
Voting with your wallet's really important. So.
Otherwise, I just wait for sales.
Oh, that's why I'm only going to attempt to pay $5 for Mortal Kombat 1 when the time is right, because
Give it a month.
I am
2
not
months. I don't know.
paying anything beyond $5 for that game, because you can get 11 for that very same price right now, and that's what I'm going to do. I gave them all my money the first time. I'm not doing it again. They can kiss my ass.
They did that dirty.
Yeah.
They did that very dirty.
I remember that story well.
So, yeah, it's still stupid. Like, I'm still just like, what are you doing? I don't know. But most games, though, with AAA space, I rarely buy AAA anymore anyway. Like, even Baldur's
Same.
Gate's not AAA game, So I'm not paying that much for games anymore anyway. But a lot of the times with AAA that might catch my eye, if I wait 3 or 4 months, I'll probably get it half off. Like, it's not even that long that I have to wait for it to be cheaper.
Yeah.
So I've got plenty of stuff to bide my time.
Oh God, yeah. We don't
Don't
need
we
to talk
all?
about how big
Don't
my
we
backlog
all,
is.
right?
My backlog has a backlog.
Yeah. The backlog will never go away.
No.
We'll just always have more, and that's just the life of a gamer.
Yeah.
It's just always going to be the case. So, yeah, I will not give you that $70 that you think it's worth. I know it took you 10 years. Whose fault was that?
And it makes it funnier, too, when you have all these, like, Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, and people
Yep.
just complain about the games that are there. It's like, are you telling me that you've gone through every single game
Right.
that they have given you, that you're upset that the 3 games they're dropping for the month are just not good enough? Okay, well then wait for the next month.
Then turn it off and don't pay for that month. You don't have to keep it going.
Yeah, I just
But
don't.
that
That's
takes
what I don't
time
get
and
with people.
bandwidth to be like, all right, I need to go in and cancel my subscription for this month. And then, I'm going to see something I really want next month. All right, now I have to go in and re-up my subscription. And, it forgot my credit card information. So let me put it all back in. And I'm typing this on a
Right.
console. So it's just painful.
Oh, yeah, I guess if you're on a console, that is kind of more rough going.
True. Yeah.
Apps on your phone would be your friend, I guess, at that point. But, yeah, it's too much. It's too much. I don't know why they think they need all that money. Of course,
Oh, you know why they think
I'll
they need
still
all
do
that
it
money.
every once in a while.
You know why they
Yeah.
think they need all that money, because it's capitalism. They need all of your money.
Right. That's
All
true.
of
I
it.
hate capitalism. I hate it so much. I'm not a fan. I'm sorry, dude didn't get his 3rd yacht that year, so push it out quicker, please, for $75. Thank you. We'll fix it later. That's why, AAA. That's why I'm done with you.
Yeah.
This whole we'll fix it later nonsense. I'm not giving you money until it's done. I want the game first.
Yep.
Back in the day, I always buy it at the store. They didn't give me half a game for me to get the rest later. You got the whole game. If it was broken, it was just broken, though. I get that.
Yeah.
But still, you got
That
the
was
whole
much
freaking
rarer,
game.
though, because they had to put
It
the
was.
time into quality assurance to be like, all right, we're not shipping a completely broken product. This will actually function. Good. Okay. Because if they did ship a completely broken product, it would just get returned. And then
Yeah.
they're not making any money.
Yeah. Yeah. Electronics, though, that was always harder to return those. I
Yeah,
remember.
that's
So It
true.
was always kind of like, well, at least for PC games, like it was always just like, when you were shopping in a store and had never heard of it or anything before, you're just kind of going on faith in the box art and what you're reading that it's going to be good because you're stuck with it if you bring it home, like.
Or you bought a magazine that had reviews in it, like Electronic Gaming Monthly or Game Pro, or I think Game Informer still exists, but it's a wing of GameStop.
I think it does in some capacity,
Yeah.
but they don't do the monthly magazines, I think, anymore, like hard copies. I don't know. But yes. You just had to roll the dice on faith. And it was never a cheap hobby.
Oh, no.
Like, even back then when it was $40, that's basically like paying 70 or 80 now.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
You hoped. You hoped you were going to like it. I guess the only question I would have then, like, 2 recommendations for a game. Like, somebody who's new that wants to play with 2 people and maybe with 4 people.
Are we talking board game or tabletop or role-playing game? Okay, board game. New 2 people. So,
I figure with people that are listening, like if you want to try out something and 2 people and 4 people, what's a good suggestion?
Okay. For 2 people, are you wanting something that's more like card based, or do you want something that has more of a board presence where you're moving bits around?
Probably more of a board presence.
Cool.
Yeah, where you're rolling around.
Okay. So I just happened to take a glance up at my shelves, and I saw a game there that a couple of my friends got me for my birthday a couple of years ago called Santorini. Santorini is a very interesting little, I suppose we call it an abstract, in the sense that there is a theme there, but the theme isn't super important. So you have a board, and both players will have a couple workers that go on the board. You put them down at the start of the game. And the goal of the game is to get a worker up to the 3rd tier of a tower. Now, those don't mean anything in the sense of I haven't told you how to build towers yet, but we're getting there. So on your turn, you pick one of your workers, you move it 1 space. You can move diagonally if you want to. You can't move into a space that somebody is already on.
Okay.
And then you have to build once. So when you build, you place a level of a tower in an adjacent space to your worker. Obviously not one that somebody is already on, because you can't just crush them with a block. That would be really cruel.
Well, rude, but...
Yes. So, when you build, each level has its specific kind of block. There are 3 levels to a tower, and you can put a little capstone on it to finish off a level 3 tower. When you're moving, you can move on the same level without any problems. You can move up 1 level with no problems. You can move down any number of levels with no problems. But you can't go up more than 1 level at a time. So if I'm on the ground and there's a 2-level tower next to me, I can't just jump up there. I'd have to have a level 1 first to climb up. So I can move and then build level 1, and then next turn move up to the level 1, and then build somewhere else, and then move up to the level 2. So you can see that you have to go from 1 to 2 to 3. Once you move up to a level 3, you win. That's it. The way that you can lose this game is on your turn, you must move a worker. You must build with that worker. If you can't do both of those things, you lose. So if you have a worker that is completely hemmed in with level 2 towers, they can't actually climb up there. You can't pick them to move because they can't go anywhere. So you have to move your other worker. If both of your workers are like that, you lose.
That would be
If
me.
you have a worker that you can move, but there's no legal places to build after you move, then you lose. That's a lot rarer because generally after you move, you can build on the space that you moved from, but
Oh, okay. Yeah.
it's conceivable that it could happen that way. So you can go for a victory where, all right, I'm just trying to rush a level 3 tower. I'm going to build, get all the way up there and run up there and win. But your opponent's just right there, right? So they could be like, all right, I'm going to keep moving along. Oh, you built a level 3 tower? I'll move next to it and cap it. You can't stand on it anymore. Start all over. And
Is that like when I was just constantly kicking in Mortal Kombat and just
Yes.
like pissing you off? Just kick.
So that's the basic game, which is just you have your workers and you move them around. The box also has a way to make that more interesting. There is a collection of cards that are associated with various gods and heroes in the Greek pantheon. And at the start of the game, each player gets one of those. And they each give you a unique power. And the powers are themed to the god that they're on. They're all unique and they're all very different. So like I might have the Minotaur. The Minotaur can, when I'm moving, I can move into someone else's space and then I push them. So I can not only not get blocked in by you, but but I can disrupt your placement by just shoving you. And when you're shoving someone, you shove them into the next space, even if they couldn't normally move there, because you're a Minotaur. You're just goring this person up.
Yeah,
So they're just going to run up 3
I
flights of
do.
stairs. But being moved up to a level 3 tower, you don't win the game that way. You have to move there on your turn. So that's another way that you can just shove someone into a space where they can't win, because they get moved on my turn. So now it's their turn. Moving from a level 3 to a level 3 doesn't make you win. You have to move up to a level 3 to win.
So you have to go back down first and then
Yes.
back up.
But there's another power where you also win if you jump down from a tower level 2 or higher. I think that's Icarus.
Is there fall death?
No, there's no
Or
fall,
fall
death.
damage?
No, because you're not actually falling, you're running down the stairs.
Oh, okay.
The towers are really nicely built. They're these little plastic pieces, and they are molded to look like the towers in Santorini, hence the name. They're white, and they have the little blue caps. It's a very, very nice-looking game.
Oh, fun. I can see me getting into that one, because that doesn't sound like it would take forever to play.
No,
each
I
time,
think
too.
the longest game that I've seen is like half an hour.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
And then you asked about 4 players.
Yeah.
So you want something that's kind of starter level depth, not too crazy. I
Yeah.
am looking.
Not that we're going to cry trying to figure out the rules.
Yeah. So I would actually go for. Okay. So my next question is: do you want something cooperative or competitive? Because there are board games
I
that are
like
cooperative.
play.
All right.
Yeah.
So cooperative. We're going to go to Pandemic.
Timely.
Yeah. So Pandemic is a game for 2 to either 4 or 5 players, and it varies because there's a ton of expansions for Pandemic as well, where there are 4 diseases that are starting to ravage the world, and you are playing as workers from the CDC that are going out and trying to treat and cure these diseases. So you win the game by eradicating all 4 diseases. I'm sorry, you win the game by developing cures for all 4 diseases. You don't necessarily have to eradicate them. There are a ton of ways to lose. So,
Do I have to go to Greenland and hole up, or
No.
was Madagascar is the other one that just like
Yes, Madagascar just closes
they
their
get left
borders.
to themselves?
Someone
Yeah,
has
they
a
just close their
sniffle,
borders, we're
Madagascar's done.
Yeah.
Lacey and I both played. Oh God, what was that name called? Or what was the game called? The video game where you play as a disease that's trying to ravage the world.
Was it not that?
No.
Oh, there was 2, wasn't there? There was one where you were trying to beat it, and then one where you were. I might have it.
I do have it. I'm trying to remember. I'm looking at the.
Oh, and I have like 600 games to go through too, so that could be forever. But yes,
Plague Inc.
there it is.
But yeah, this is the reverse of Plague Inc. because you're not playing as the disease, you're playing as people trying to cure the diseases. So in the game, there are little colored cubes that represent people that have these diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be placing these cubes as cards come out from a deck. And if you ever run out of a particular color and you need to place more cubes of that color, that means that disease has overrun the world and you lose.
Oh, okay.
When you're placing these cubes, you place them into different cities on the map. If you ever have to place a 4th cube of a color into a city, that causes an outbreak instead. And you move a tracker down, and then every city adjacent to that city gets a cube of that color. Because the city is just so overrun by plague that people are fleeing it and taking the plague with them.
And taking it with them, yeah.
And I think it's either 6 or 8 outbreaks ends the game because there's just so many outbreaks going on that the whole world has gone pandemic, hence the title.
Yeah.
The third way that you can
do now?
lose
Lock her up.
is at the end of each of your turns, you have to draw 2 cards off a player deck. If that deck ever runs out and you need to draw and you can't, you lose because you've run out of time and the diseases have just gone endemic. So those cards that you're drawing have colors on them and a city. And those represent information about the different diseases. So the way that you cure a disease is you have to get 4 cards. It's either 4 or 5. Again, I've played so many different versions of Pandemic, and they're all slightly
Sure.
different. Pretty sure it's 5, actually. You get enough of these cards together, and you take them to a treatment center and develop a cure. That's the way that you develop a cure, but it's a lot trickier than just, all right, I get card and go place. Because, as I said, these cards have a city name on them, and you're going to be drawing them as the different players. If I have the card for, say, Calcutta, and you have a bunch of other, I think Calcutta's yellow, you have a bunch of other yellows, you want this Calcutta card, I can give it to you, but only if we're both in Calcutta. So we have to both get
But I don't
ourselves
want to go to Calcutta.
Too bad. So that's one of the ways that you can share cards. It's called sharing knowledge. That's actually the only way that you can share cards. And you can run around trying to treat these diseases, but you only have a certain number of actions every turn. Most people only get 4.
Okay.
And after you do your actions, you draw cards, and that's just running up the game clock. And after each player's turn, you draw cards off the infection deck to see what new places are infected. So these cubes are constantly coming out. So you have to deal with things that are flaring up here and there, and also start working toward the cures. And the player deck also has some bad cards in it called epidemic cards. When you draw an epidemic card, you take the bottom card of the infection deck and put 3 cubes on it. So that city immediately goes full red hot. Then you take the entire infection discard pile, shuffle it, and put it on top of the deck. So everywhere that was already infected is going to start getting reinfected.
Sound familiar? No.
And then you move up the infection tracker where you're going to start drawing more and more cards from this deck every turn because the infections are getting more and more virulent.
Getting worse. Yeah.
So base level pandemic has often been referred to as a puzzle that you're just trying to solve. And I will say the one kind of negative thing about this game is it has an issue that you see often in co-op games where one person that really knows the game can just kind of sit there, look at the puzzle for a few minutes, and then tell everybody else what to do. And some people are okay with that because they want to feel like they're part of a team. Some people really don't like just being told what to do because they don't feel like they're playing the game. They feel like someone.
Sure.
But as a way to introduce yourself to cooperative games and as a way for 4 people to just get together, not be at each other's throats for 90 minutes, and try and come together to solve this puzzle, it's a great introduction to cooperative games.
Love that.
And then if you want to step up from that, I would actually recommend Arkham Horror. Although I will say Arkham Horror plays better with lower player counts. So with 4 players, you might not have a good time. That one's probably better with 2. But it has a lot of similar things to Pandemic, but both with a Cthulhu theme and also with a little more depth. You don't just go to a place and take an action and clear a cube. You have to go to a place and try and fight something by rolling dice, depending on your stat for that thing. So it's similar ideas, but cranked up and with more flavor attached to them.
All right, so I've got one more question.
Yes, sir.
And this is not board game related. This is just curious on my part. So is it
Yeah, go for it.
Cthulhu that you love, or is it Lovecraft in general?
Oh, let's get the obvious part out of the way. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was a horrific human being who was a awful xenophobic racist. And I don't endorse his views. I don't think that he was a good person. And I've seen some efforts to try and, I hate to use the term whitewash, but some efforts to try and just gloss over the fact that he was an awful human being. And that's terrible.
Sure.
He was an awful human being, and we need to remember that. So I enjoy the mythos that sprang up around the things that came out of his creativity, even though his creativity was marred by his racism and xenophobia. Okay. So I would say more Cthulhu than Lovecraft.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's kind of taken on its own life, I would think, at this point, from so many other people adding their own creativity to it, that it's morphed from just his baby.
Even in his own lifespan and time frame, there were people already adding to his mythos because he was just a pulp author that was trying to put out stories to get paid. And he wrote some good stories. He also wrote some stories that are genuinely horrific to read because they are just inundated with his views on
Just garbage, Pearson.
Yeah.
I was just curious. I wasn't
No,
trying
you're all
to
good.
imply that you were
No.
but yeah.
You stand Lovecraft,
Oh God, no.
No. I understand that he's but at least it's good that people are acknowledging that, because I know for many, many years it was just like, oh, Lovecraft is so great, and then suddenly I started hearing the worst parts, and I was like, oh shit, when did this happen?
Yeah,
but it was because no one was talking about it.
Even if you can just read stories like the Shadow over Innsmouth, you can read that story and see the racism in it. Or like I think it's A Strange Case of Arthur German and His Family, is a story about a guy who went to Africa, and you find out at the end of the story that he was interbreeding with great white apes, and that's obviously a story about miscegenation, which is awful. And
Yeah.
that whole concept is just horrific. And
Yeah.
Lovecraft was a shitty person for holding those views.
Anyway, hey.
So Cthulhu it is.
Yes.
Cthulhu it is. That's fair.
Cthulhu
Hey,
good.
no, I get it.
Actually, more like
Cthulhu
Cthulhu.
So, Lacey, anything else before we let this man go?
I think he was so thorough that, yeah, thank you. It was really fun to listen to, though. Finding someone who's really passionate about something and is that knowledgeable is just always interesting to listen to. So, thank you.
And we barely scraped the
Yeah.
surface of tabletop role-playing, so there might be space for
I'm
a part
sure.
2 somewhere down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'd love to have you back on for if you have another topic that you want to discuss. Feel free, hit us up and let us know, and we'll be like,
I'm
yeah,
happy to
let's
be
bring
here.
it
I'm
back.
also happy to be on the sidelines in the Discord, talking over everything that y'all are doing and just keeping the conversation rolling.
That's right, people.
Yeah.
As we say every week, he's got his own little space we gave him. So anytime you want to go in there and get knowledged up, some Daeva knowledge, jump on in there. Come on, this is why we want people to come into the Discord.
There you go. Learn something and meet some really cool people.
There are a
We're
lot of
small,
really cool
but we're
people in the Discord.
mighty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
We
yeah.
chat every day. So at least there's
Yeah.
that. Like, it's very active for us. As small as we are, but we're fun. Come join us.
That's right. If you want to reach out to the show, if you want to tell us your favorite tabletop games, if you've
Please.
been playing them, if you've got a favorite, or maybe if you've been on the sidelines and then David just convinced you, oh, shit, I've got to play tabletop games now. I'm going to do it. Let us know on our social media platforms at Super Mega Crash everywhere. And
That we know about.
if you want to send us a nice, juicy email, supermegacrash@gmail.com. Tell us like your life story about tabletop games and whatever they mean to you. I'd love to read that out on the show if someone would be so inclined to send us one of those emails. You can support the show. I'm struggling my words again. What I need to do is just do this like walking. You're going to support the show over at Patreon. It's the pencil and the paper site over there.
Yeah, the pencil and paper productions.
Right. Because sometimes we post stuff over there. Sometimes we don't. It doesn't matter. But anyway, you can leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app. You can keep up with any and all things pencil, paper, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, dude is walking.
pencilpaperproductions.com/Super Mega Crash. That's where it is. Links are down below where you read things like what this episode was about. You understand? Anyway, that's how I got there. David, tell everybody where they can find you on social media if you want to be found.
Well, I think the best place for this audience to find me on social media is in the Pencil Paper Productions Discord, because I am there and I am watching and doing the moderation things. I do have a Twitter. I refuse to call it X. Go fuck yourself, Elon Musk.
Fair.
My Twitter is at Daeva Palladion, which is DaevaPalladion. You can also see the live streams that I have done. I post VODs of all of my D&D games, although that's kind of trailing off lately for personal reasons. I also have a couple VODs up of the one time I played a video game that my boyfriend bought for me. Also, hey baby, I love you.
Aw.
So that is at twitch.tv/Daeva Palladion. It's exactly the same as it is on my social handle. And that's about it as far as I am on social space.
All right.
There you
Well,
go. Excellent.
put all those links down below. So if you want to go check those out, go click them. But join us again next week, siblings. But until then, go beyond your limits.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.